The time is now 4 p.m. This is the Growth Fund Committee meeting in Grand Forks City Hall. The date is Monday something, which I couldn't tell you the date is, August 22nd.
September 26th.
Yep, September 26th, there we go. Call the meeting to order with roll call.
Crary.
Here.
Holt. Kwame.
Here.
Osowski. Wagle. Whitney. Here. Wolf.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, and the first item on the agenda is the minutes for August 22nd. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes or any discussion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 3 of our agenda, sale of Corporate Center 1.
I'll take this one. All right, there's a lot coming at you in this particular agenda item. I just want to make sure that you're all aware of what's ultimately being requested. That we approve what the purchase price would be on the exercise of the option. That you approve the tenant's notice of intent to exercise the options, which is attachment number 3. That you approve the document to actually exercise that option. And then that document would also then assign those purchase rights that would accrue upon exercise of the option. That document is in draft format, so that approval would be subject to final review and approval by the City Attorney's Office. Also, that document is attachment number 4. Connected to it, and I'm not sure the staff report necessarily said it, but to approve the actual purchase agreement that would be executed by the assignee of the tenants upon exercise of the option. That too is in draft format. So that would be, again, subject to final review and approval by the City Attorney's Office. And then also a short-term extension of the current leases of the 3 tenants in the Corporate Center 1 building, 3 to 4 months or until the closing occurs, whichever would occur first, because there are the leases will expire here, I think, before the time we close. So that's kind of the ask. I wanted to go through briefly just to give some background as to how we got here. There were leases that were executed back in 1999. This is all relating to Corporate Center 1 now. Between the JDA, Alaris Financial, their predecessor, I guess, make sure I got the right name, First National Realty Corporation, it's now Alaris Financial, Brady Martz, and the Cameron Law Firm. They had 2 options. Each of the leases mirrored each other. Each of them had 2 options to extend the lease, and all of them did that. And so currently, the Alaris and Brady Martz leases are set to expire October 31st of this year, and the law firm lease is set to expire November 30th of this year. Also in connection with those leases were option agreements that each of the parties executed back in 1999. All of those option agreements are recorded against the property. They allowed for each of the tenants to buy their respective leased premises and their allocable portion of the common area. It was contemplated that if they each exercise those options, there might be some sort of condominium that would have to be developed amongst them under those set of circumstances. The option period provided that it couldn't be more than, you couldn't exercise the option earlier than 21 years from the commencement date of the lease, nor later than 23 years after the commencement date of the lease. So there's a 2-year window. The commencement date of the lease is set forth in the lease. It says the earlier 30 days of occupancy, or when they open for business, whichever occurred first. We've got some certificate of occupancies that date in October, November, so suffice it to say it's the fall of each year, October, November time frame is when those options would expire. So we're bumping up against the expiration date for the option period because it would be more likely end of October, November timeframe when those options would expire. The three tenants, Alaris, Brady, and Brady Martz and the law firm, do want to exercise those options. They want to do so jointly, collectively, and simultaneously. So instead of buying their respective units, I guess, within the building, they want to buy the entire structure, right? In connection, they also want to assign those rights that would accrue from the exercise of those options to a third party. I understand that to be Edgewood Properties. Triple LP is the entity that they would assign that to, and that entity would then be the purchaser of the building, and presumably then lease it back to the three tenants. That assignment would occur jointly and simultaneously with the exercise of the options. So there wouldn't be any time period in between the exercise of the options and that assignment. This is where it gets a little tricky, and I'm trying to explain a 7th grade algebra problem verbally, because that's what it is. There is a purchase price formula set forth in the option agreements, and these option agreements, they're identical, they mirror one another for all three of them. It's section 1.03 of the option agreements, and those can be found at attachment number 2. It's not the clearest of language in the agreements, and it took some time to review. My office, along with the tenant's attorney, we've gone through it a number of times to come up with what we think is a reasonable interpretation of this formula. The formula, if you take a look at it, did contemplate that the purchase would be something less than fair market value because there's a deduction. And that was in recognition that the three tenants came down at a time when the downtown area was in devastation. And so to account for that and recognizing that they did so, there would be, you'd pay less than the fair market value of the property. So now I'm going to try to go through the calculation as best I can. The starting point is the fair market value of the corporate center. That's the starting point for the calculation. And then there are two components for the deduction. 1/2 of the appreciation in value remaining after the full recovery of the initial equity, and an interest component as well at a rate of 2.5% for the length of the lease, and that would be 23 years. The initial equity, that's a defined term in the option agreements. And for the corporate center, it's about $5.4 million, just a little short of $5.4 million. The fair market value, about a year ago or so, a little more than that, the city did engage appraisal services out of Fargo to provide an appraisal of both corporate 1 and corporate 2. At that time, effective as of April 6th of 2021, appraisal services determined the appraised value of corporate 1 was $7,050,000. After that, as you know, we sold corporate 2 through kind of a public auction bidding process, and we received a little over $2.5 million. And when you take a look at the net rentable space for corporate 2, it ended up to be about $113 a square foot of rentable space. And so applying that to the rentable space for corporate 2, the value is $6 million, just short of $7 million, $6,972,000. It seemed reasonable to use that number rather than the appraised value, just because you had a bidding process through a peer building. And you got to remember, and we need to talk about that, these buildings are connected to one another, both from a heating system and skyway system. So it just seemed reasonable that would be the starting point rather than the $7,050,000. The difference is a little over $77,000. So then you have to try to figure out, okay, what's the deduction? And as I stated, the deduction starts with the appreciation in value. And looking at the language, it appears that interpretation or that term, although not defined, seems to be a defined term within the agreement itself. And it was arrived at that should be the fair market value, that's $6.9 million, minus that initial equity of that $5.4 million. That results in about a $1,579,000 figure. And then you take 50% of that. That's part of the deduction, and you get to about $790,000. And then it goes on to say you're supposed to have simple interest thereon. And so now you have to figure out what does the word thereon apply to. And it was concluded that you should apply the interest on that $790,000 figure. And that gets you to about $454,000. Over a course of 23 years, it's simple interest of 2.5% per year. So you add both that 50% of the appreciation and value calculation and that interest calculation to arrive at a total deduction for a sales price of $1,244,000. I'm not going to, and change, right? So with that, then the sales price, when you take a look at the fair market value of $6,972,000 minus the $1,244,000, the purchase price starts then at $5,728,311. I know that there's some rounding things here. If you take the decimal out a number of places, you're going to get to these numbers. So it's not, we're off maybe $10 here or there on a couple of them, but a couple of these calculations, but I did the math a number of times and it works out. We thought that was a reasonable interpretation of the language of Section 103 as to the purchase price. And the reason we thought that is because a couple of years ago, the city did an interpretation of this. And I can go through it, but at the end of the day, under the prior interpretation, it actually results in a premium over and above the fair market value, even the fair market value determined by the appraisal. And it's based upon the starting point and what's the deduction. And if you wanted to go through the math, it's page 5 of the staff report. It kind of goes through that different analysis. And the reason it doesn't make sense is because the value didn't get to a certain level for Corporate Center 2. It made sense if you have a value that is significantly higher, but applying the facts to the language, it becomes unreasonable, that prior interpretation. So the reason I put that in there is to show you what was done before and to show why, in comparison, it looks like what we've done is a reasonable read of the language of what the purchase price should be. There's going to be a credit, and we've had a number of meetings with the tenants for several months now, reviewing this language. They've provided us some reports, inspection reports of the premises, one of which is attached as number 6 to the staff report. And it showed there's a little over $26,000 of immediate repairs that needed to be done. And in speaking with staff, it seemed reasonable that should be as a credit against the sales price. So at the end of the day, the purchase price is that $5,702,248 amount. So at this point, given the fact that we've worked diligently, worked hard on trying to arrive at this, and knowing that the tenants want to exercise but don't want to ultimately be the buyer, we don't want to have to renegotiate the terms of this with their assignee. And so where we're at is we want to make sure that purchase price analysis, which the tenants have all agreed will apply, would also apply to whoever they assign it to. That we have a purchase agreement negotiated, and that the assignee would be obligated would not only obtain those purchase rights, but be obligated under the purchase obligations that they'd have to buy Corporate Center 2, including to accept and assume that purchase price. So we're not going back again if there's an assignment. And so the notice of intent, which is attachment number 3, which has been finalized, my office and representations for the tenants have gone through that, and that would be ready for approval. There's no further discussion on that particular document. Be mindful that is not the exercise document. It just provides notice of their intention to do so. But it describes that if they do it, it's going to be joint and simultaneous, that it's going to be for the Corporate Center 1 parcel, that there's going to be an assignment of some of these coupling agreements. Because back when the cities or the JDA sold Corporate Center 2, there were some agreements that had to be put into place for the common heating system and the Skyway system. And so we'd assign those rights to the buyer, that the purchase price is set out in that notice of intent, as I just described, that it would be a joint, collective, and simultaneous assignment of those purchase rights that accrue, again, when they exercise. So the document that ultimately would be signed for the exercise and the assignment, the 3 tenants would execute that document, as would the assigned buyer would execute it at the same time. The exercise document at this point is still, like I said, still being negotiated, but it describes that notice of intent, says the parties will negotiate in good faith. That would, set out that this be this joint exercise, this joint assignment. The buyer would accept the assignment and they assume all the obligations. And importantly, the notice of intent says, subject to that agreement being in place, that the JDA is approving this procedure, approving the purchase price, approving all these, how we get here when they exercise, subject to that exercise document being finalized. The next document is I just talked about, is actually the exercise document or the assignment document. That's attachment 4. Again, that's still in draft format, but it does provide for, again, the simultaneous exercise and assignment of those purchase rights. So if you think about it, in sequencing, it would be the exercise of the options and then immediately the transfer of the right to purchase at that point, or the purchase at that point, and the assumption by the buyer. There are default provisions in that exercise document. One of the things that I believe the tenants are going to be requesting is that if, for example, the buyer would happen to default under the purchase agreement, and that exercise document also requires that the buyer execute the purchase agreement for the purchase of the Corporate 2 at the same time. So everything is done instantly. And that's why we're trying to negotiate and get all those documents in play beforehand. But one of the items that the tenants have talked to me about is, if that would happen, if the buyer would happen to default, that they have an opportunity to be retransferred those purchase rights. They'd have X period of time to decide if they want them back or not. And that seems reasonable, so we keep the keep the transaction in play. But if they don't exercise, then the options would have expired at that point. And the JDA would still own the building, and we'd have to decide what to do with it afterwards. That's a contingency that's probably not going to happen, but it's a contingency that the tenants want to account for, which makes sense. The purchase agreement is attachment 5. Again, that's also in draft format. It mirrors the agreement for Corporate Center 2. A couple of things is that it does say that we're selling it as is, and that's the reason is that they've been in there for 23 years. They should know the condition of the property, and we've already gotten a couple of reports from them. So, and then there's one other item. There's still there has to be some, what I call decoupling. There's still some utility matters that are within Corporate 2 that actually are used for the parking garage that are attached to it. The JDA will continue to own that parking garage. And so there is a report, and it's attachment 7, that kind of delineates the various things that would have to be decoupled from that parking garage from Corporate 2. The city is going through that right now and analyzing which items they want to go forward with. and which items we may just keep in place for the near term or maybe in the long term. And if anything stays in place, then at that point, what we do is we'd enter into what I'd call utility access, basically so that, if there's some electrical box or something in corporate 2 that's used for the garage, that we'd have access to gain. It'd be a pretty simple agreement. And then the last item, and it's connected, is that, like I said, the leases are set to expire soon. We're expecting the closing to occur in December of this year. And because of that fact, the tenants want to extend the leases under the same terms and conditions they have now, 3 to 4 month period of time, or the date the closing, whichever would happen to occur first. So that's, hopefully, you understand it. It is a complicated, the complexity isn't the options or the exercise. The complexity started with how do we deal with interpreting this purchase price provision in the option agreements. And then I guess the layer is that the tenants want to assign and have somebody else buy the building and lease it back. Add another layer of complexity, but I think we've worked through it. It's been a pleasure working with tenants to getting this to this point. So with that, I'll yield to any questions that any of the members might have.
Do we want to recognize a conflict of interest?
Yeah,
potentially?
say, Chair, I have a conflict and would request to be recused from the conversation and the vote.
Do we want to, let someone make the motion to include him, right?
I think we make the motion to recuse him, and then we can vote no if we want to include him. That would be the other way around.
It's the other way. It's usually, the way I recommend it is...
I always get this confused.
And the reason I do this is because when you're on a governing body, you do actually have an obligation to vote. And so it should be in the affirmative that the motion should be, we allow to vote.
Mr. Wolf to vote.
However, I'm suspecting that vote will fail. And if it fails, then he would be not allowed to participate.
So I make a motion that Mr. Wolf be allowed to vote on this item.
Second?
Vote, and we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote aye. Same sign for those against.
Aye.
Motion fails. Do we also want to recognize Growth Fund Committee Chair Weigel?
Sounds good. I'm here. Sorry I'm late. Apologize. Got out of work late. Thanks to Kyle for taking care of that. Do we have any other questions for Mr. Gossett, Mr. Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gossett, just quick question, just in the process, I guess. So the assignment, all that makes sense. I'm good with the number, especially if the tenants are good with the number. I mean, you got a law firm, a bank, and an accounting firm. I think between that and the city attorney's office, I'm sure you guys could hammer out those details. More so than in regards to a couple quick questions. One, the duration for closing is pretty reasonable. I didn't see anything in the contract for any due diligence period. Does the end user, then buyer, do they have a due diligence period where they can, I noticed some deliverables, but it's not a ton. So do they have is the earnest money, is that refundable, non-refundable? Is there a certain amount of days, does that become non-refundable after certain deliverables? Is there any word on that, or is it more or less, hey, we're closing December, let's get there. If we don't get there, they get refund earnest money? Or can you kind of talk about the ramifications if they do default or just back out?
Yeah, if under the terms of the agreement, if my memory serves me, the earnest money would be forfeited to the JDA. And we could then either decide to terminate the agreement or pursue other remedies against the buyer. But the earnest money would be retained. Really, the only due diligence, I mean, there is provisions that they're allowed to inspect the premises. Mm-hmm. The only other contingency is the title work that would need to be done. But that, I don't envision that being an impediment here. I also don't envision that the inspection of the building would be an impediment, because I understand that the efforts by the tenants to locate the buyer have been ongoing for quite some time. So because of that, the reality of that those circumstances, there just wasn't any real need to do any further due diligence in the time period, so.
Okay, I just want to confirm that. Maybe I'll take it even a step further back. Even with Mr. Weber in the back, this has been ongoing for quite some time. It's nice to, at least personally speaking, I think it's nice that as a growth fund or even as a city to kind of get out of owning real estate. So I think it's kind of nice to see that this is kind of coming to a head. So I'm glad that we've come this far. And in regards, going back into the weeds, so kind of the inspection then. So obviously there's something accounted for immediate needs, and that's a credit. What about any? Has anything been addressed? I mean, they've been there a long time. Has there been anything from? I mean, as the landlord, any major improvements? Because obviously, kind of probably getting towards the end useful life of a lot of the mechanical systems. Those are big ticket items. Has any of that has already been factored in the price, or is that? I just don't want something to come up, in 2 months and buyers like, hey, we have this big of a price tag to get a bunch of new HVAC units or what have you, just because it has been a duration there.
It's a very good question. There have been discussions about some of those items. The most recent discussion was that the tenants would get us some information about some of these items that the JDA may or may not have done up to this point. I don't know if we've gotten that list yet, and then the city would make a determination as to those items. Now, one of the reports that came back was a fairly significant number, and it's not factored in intentionally not factored in, and that's what the discussion was is, okay, we understand that there may be some things beyond even the $26,000 figure that need to be done, and we're waiting for the tenants to kind of get us that list, but it's not going to be the huge dollar ticket items. That there was a discussion specifically on those type of items.
So those big ticket items then potentially would or would not come back to the committee to approve a further credit, or however they want to handle that, whether the city provide that or how that ever irons out.
If there was a change in the purchase agreement because of those items, that would definitely come back to the JDA, because what we're establishing right now is this $5.7 million is the purchase, which already accounts for the $26,000 credit. And there may be other items that the JDA, administratively would just do. Mm-hmm. Some of those things probably wouldn't come back to the JDA. I think we just perform those tasks. But if there is something that would alter this price, it would have to come back to the JDA, because we are establishing it's $5.7 million, and we're establishing we've already got a $26,000 credit in there for certain improvements.
Okay. At least, just want to make sure at least that conversation is being had on the back, and we don't have to be part of that, we don't have to be privy to that, but just want to make sure so something doesn't come up down the road, and if it does, we're kind of aware of it at least.
Yeah, and if it does, then I'm not expecting it, but if it does, it certainly comes back to the JDA for approval.
Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Whitney?
I think to follow up on that question, Mr. Gusset, what would that threshold that you would see where it would have to come back here versus those that are in negotiations kind of just have that conversation? What's that threshold?
The administration has up to $50,000 they could expend without seeking approval, so it seems to me that would be the number that I would be targeting.
Okay, thank you. And then, as you know, when you look at attachment 7 with some of those decoupling, if you will, costs that are there, are those additional costs that the JDA would expect to have to then incur for those decouplings, or is that something that would then just be added to, say, reducing the sales price so that it could happen, or what's the plan for that?
That's a good question. I don't know if it would ultimately be the responsibility of the JDA, because we have to unwind, I guess, the interconnection between the parking garage and the corporate center too. And that's why you can see some of those items are fairly expensive.
Yep.
And it may be that we just leave everything in place because it's just not, it doesn't impede their ability to use the building. We just need to get access to an electrical panel or things like that, it may be cost prohibitive to move that when it doesn't change anything.
Okay.
So
And it did appear that it's not like an expectation of the sale of the building, that some of those things have to happen for that sale to occur.
That's correct. The tenants have been accommodating in that regard, that they'd work with the JDA and try to work through those issues. I just brought that to the attention of the JDA, so that this committee and the JDA, so you understand that there are some items that are still going to be connected between the parking garage and the corporate center, so.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kavami?
Just a quick one. So the as-is protects us if something pops up a year from now or a half from now. They have a couple of different studies here, and I am a little concerned that one's from January of this year and prices, I guess that's up to the purchasers, but prices have certainly changed since January. And then the other one is from 2020, and that decoupling costs, I think those are dramatically different. So I would just want to make sure that we have language in there, number one, to protect us if something's found, and number two, to make sure that we have access and don't have to decouple if we don't have to.
And it does. The purchase agreement does contemplate what I think I described it as a utility access agreement. And that would be intended we'd use that report to say, okay, these are the things that we know are connected to the parking garage and the corporate center one. If we keep everything the same, there are some things that are like $1,000 that probably get done, but those that would stay in place, that would be the subject matter of that utility access agreement, basically allowing us to have access. If there's repairs to those type items, the JDA would have to be responsible for it, but just so that we'd have access to it.
Any further comments? Any motions?
Looking at the staff report, are we set to approve this, to move this to JDA? Is that correct? Or
Correct. It would be a recommendation, and back to my what you'd be doing is recommending the approval of that purchase price. Sure.
Yeah, there it is.
Approval of the tenant's notice of intent to exercise, and then approval of the assignment document and the purchase agreement, subject to final review and approval by the city attorney's office, and then also approval of a short extension of their leases. I would suggest a 4-month period of time, up to that period or the date of closing, whichever occurs first, using under the same terms and conditions they currently have.
I'd make that motion.
Can we do that all in one?
Yeah, is that acceptable? For 4 months as the short-term lease?
We have a motion by Kavami. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Whitney. Any further comments? I do have one. Ms. Richards or Mr. Gosted. I know a lot of these buildings, when they were purchased, and I may have missed this, so I apologize. The money obviously goes back to the city or the growth fund. Is there any strings attached to that money, where it can be used, how it can be used, and so on?
Yes, it relates back to the original funding of the construction of the building after the 97 flood. So of whatever the net proceeds are, 36% will go to the CDBG program, because there was a CDBG grant that funded 36% of the construction. The balance will be JDA's sole authority for spending.
Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item number 4, startup loan request. 4.1 is try it on. Mr. Lund.
Chairman Wiggles, members of the Growth Fund Committee, I think it's a pleasure to be here this evening. I have 2 requests in front of you for Startup Grand Forks loan program. Before we get into that, I'll just take a couple of minutes, but if that's all right, Mr. Chairman, just to kind of review the program and sort of how we got here. Startup Grand Forks loan program was approved about 3 years ago. And the goal was to support the creation of new companies in Grand Forks to support entrepreneurship in the region. We spent a lot of time on the aspects of how the program is funded and what that looks like. But a really important aspect of this program has really been mentorship and connecting with people that can help these businesses grow as they're looking at what their next steps are. The people that put this program together really spent a lot of time putting together those relationships with the Small Business Development Center, SCORE, and other experienced entrepreneurs. In addition, a loan review committee was established that consists of 3 local entrepreneurs, a local lender, a physician at Altru, UND professor of entrepreneurship, a staff member at the University of North Dakota Center for Innovation, and a member of the UND student-run Dakota Venture Group. The program was previously administered by EDC Business Development Director Brendan Bombach, but not really on behalf of the EDC. It was really in his role as president of Revolve Grand Forks, the organization in Grand Forks that's supporting a culture of entrepreneurship in our community. And staff believed that an application was ready, and there was a lot of work that went into it before that time. Then they would meet with that loan review committee, walk through it, and in many cases, in all cases, get some feedback and some critique, and I think in every case, really rework some of those financial projections of the business plan to make for a better business proposal. Over the last 2 months, that loan review committee and myself and others have worked with both of the applicants here today to get them to this point. We mentioned at the last meeting, and thank you very much for allowing to hear the ones that were able to move forward, 2 out of the 3 that recommended for moving forward, so one of them was not in the position, unfortunately, to be with here this evening. In fact, prior to his departure, and I haven't revised these numbers, Mr. Bombach represented that only 25% of the people that he talked to about this program ever made it to this point, so I guess that just further illustrates that the program wasn't necessarily, and staff involved in this wasn't necessarily just, a quick way to get to this committee to seek funding. It really was an opportunity to try to make their businesses better and put them in a better position, whatever path they chose. Early discussions, maybe just a review, was focused on maybe providing grants, but then we kind of put our heads together and realized those grants don't revolve very quickly, so we put together another package to focus on a debt instrument, although the terms are very attractive, as you know. Maximum loan amount of $30,000, a 5-year term, no payments and no interest for the first year, and a 5% amortization over the final 48 months. It's corporately guaranteed, which is really just a fancy way to say that the company is going to sign a loan agreement and promissory note, but no corporate guarantees or additional collateral beyond is expected. Early on, the North Dakota Development Fund partnered with the program. I think for the first year, or maybe just a little bit longer, but then they had a refocusing of their program, and so the $30,000 and the Growth Fund Committee and the Jobs Development Authority moved forward with that exclusively from their responsibility. If there are any questions on that, I'll just move through the first application, Mr. Chairman. The first application in front of you is Try It On, and I'm pleased to introduce, and she'll be up here in just a moment, Savannah Simmer. She's the founder of Try It On. Savannah has developed a web application to enhance the local shopping experience by scheduling fitting room times with apparel and accessories of the shopper's choosing. She'll tell you a little bit about her journey, including her recent work with Shopify, the world's leading online shopping platform. Savannah is seeking financing through the Startup Loan Program to complete work on her web plugin to enable the launch of Try It On this fall. Savannah, before it's all said and done, will invest over $70,000 of resources in this endeavor, and she's seeking a $30,000 loan through the startup program to help get her to the goal. The application and some of her key findings she'll go over was included in the public packet. The business plan, financial projections, and some other documents were included under a separate cover due to the confidential nature of those documents. She'll share this with you too, but her revenue really in terms of her business is selling, I'm not sure if she'll call it a subscription, I'm going to call it that right now. And her customers are the retailers, most likely boutique retailers that buy her service, and then their customers will have access to that service that she's provided. So with that very brief introduction, I'll invite Ms. Simmers to come up here and tell you a little bit about her and her journey of Try It On.
Thank you, Mr. Lund. Ms. Simmers.
Hi, thank you for
Welcome.
having me. I'm bad with formalities of this nature.
Go for it.
I'm Savannah Simmers, founder of Try It On. So thank you, Keith, for the good description of what the application is, but Try It On is from our research and finding, the nation's first application of this type. So what it is it's an online scheduler that allows the shopper to build their dressing room on an e-commerce platform, Shopify specifically right now. And then once they're finished adding to their cart or their dressing room, they get to schedule their time and date and then try it on in the store. So with this, the creation was kind of founded during COVID to an extent. So not many people could go to stores to buy stuff, so they just had to buy online and then return, and hopefully things worked and didn't work. The bad thing, it was a bad situation for both the retailer and the consumer. So the retailer had the added expense and unpredictable inventory of sales and then returns, and then the shopper had a bad experience of things not working and then potentially not returning in a certain window of time, and then it just didn't really help small businesses grow. So during that time, they had a lot of struggles in general, but e-com showed high growth, local business fell. So with the advice and kind of partnership with a couple different retailers here in Grand Forks, I had curated the idea and then got their feedback as far as what platform they use. So Shopify being the nation's largest and actually the world's largest, they hold 33% of the market share in e-commerce, and with that, there's almost 100,000 boutiques that would qualify to use this or could probably utilize my software. And then from there, it's kind of, we have our subsidiary next, or the next platforms we would look to build our application on are WooCommerce and Square. So they're kind of the two that follow it, but first away, we had to build an app for a certain platform. From there, we are in submitting phase at Shopify. So right now it's about a 2 to 6 week window where Shopify tries to break your app. So that's where we are right now. We just hit 2 weeks today, so we're looking forward to hearing their feedback as far as if they're running into roadblocks or if we're doing well. So far, we're hoping no word is a good word. So moving forward, I have a great development team that's out of North Dakota. They're based in Fargo. This is their first Shopify application, but not their first endeavor this large by any means. Our website is live. So tryidon.io is live right now, so you can go visit that page. It tells you a little bit about the software. There's opportunities to refer a retailer. So say you get the opportunity to use the platform and you really enjoy it and you wished your local boutique would use it and provide you with that, you could go online and refer them, or you could tag them in one of our Facebook posts or something like that. Other than that, does anyone have questions?
Any questions for Mr. Kerr?
I'm sure there's a lot of questions.
Yes. Well, Ms. Simmers, appreciate you coming in. I think it's a great idea. I personally probably wouldn't use it. My wife probably would. But so just kind of go through a little bit, maybe your plan. I like the fact that most likely it's very scalable, obviously, that, if it's adopted by the more boutiques, Mr. Lund alluded to boutiques, is that kind of the target market? Is kind of that boutique industry, or is it, could it be, major retailers, a Nordstrom, and et cetera, or is that?
So right now in phase 1, the app is only available on Shopify, so the retailer would have to use Shopify as their platform. Someone as large as probably Nordstrom wouldn't really utilize it.
Right.
But there is, as far as scalability, phase 1, we are offering just a flat rate subscription-based model. So for $49.99 a month, you have access to the Try It On platform. Our phase 2 that we're already starting to work into is for multiple locations. So one of our beta testers does have multiple locations. So what that would mean is where are you going to try it on? So she has 2 locations, one in North Dakota, one in Minnesota. So for scalability, we're offering the flat rate of $50 a month for one location with an additional $10 a month for second, third, and so on locations. So that's our phase 1 phase 1 to 2 for growth model. And then moving forward, it would be offering some more add-ons as far as analytics with growth, where we started with a big project and the entry level was $150,000, and that was a little unachievable right away. So we went through as a team to say, what can we scratch to get to our MVP? So one of those big things that we scratched was the analytics. I'm a huge believer in data and analytics, but in the beginning phases, it just didn't actually make it work. It was the extra that helped the retailer grow their business. So that's the overall arching goal, is to help the retailer grow and then to provide that extra experience for the consumer who's super busy and doesn't have time to shop. But when we can include analytics, we'll be able to help that retailer see how many appointments are booked, when is traffic going to their website, are people shopping at 10 o'clock at night or 7 a.m. in the morning, and then when is their most popular time to book a fitting room? Are they seeing high hours in the noon hour? Do they need to add more dressing rooms? Is this working? Like, do they need to extend their hours? Maybe they're available longer on Monday nights than they are on Sunday nights and stuff like that. So that's phase like 2.5, I guess. 2 is right away just the multi-locations, because that's kind of in our first. I didn't want to push that off, but to be able to get into our Shopify submitting phase, which is that 2 to 6 weeks window, which is a long time when you're building something and you just want to get it out there. But so the first is definitely getting the multi-locations.
And 2 more quick questions. One you alluded to, so you've, it sounds like you've already been piloting it with a couple of retailers. Well, so the question 1 would be, how has their response been thus far? And then the second one, what would you use the funds for?
So unfortunately, we haven't been able to launch it on their website just because Shopify won't let us.
Okay.
We have to get approved before Shopify. What we've been doing in this beginning phase is really just doing questions and answers back to each other. Okay, this is what we're thinking. Tell me the roadblock. To get their side, so we build a product that they actually need and can use. Question 2, to finish development, so we're not quite there yet. We still have those next few phases in line, and then to use for marketing to get more retailers on board. Shopify offers a really good way to boost your ad or be like paid or promoted on their app store, so that would be a big one right away.
Ms. Whitney?
Thank you. That was actually one of my questions. Does Shopify help you market this on their platform to retailers, or are you expected to have to go and do your own kind of research on who's using Shopify, who's not, and do your own marketing? What's that strategy for you look like?
Yes, so Shopify offers an app store similar to how we would use on our cell phones, like the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. It's very visually the same. Maybe closer to like the Microsoft Play Store if you're on a computer. So you have promoted apps, you can search by industry, search by keywords. So that's been a big part of our marketing strategy right away as we move into the submitting phase, is building out the keywords in our app description to make sure we're hitting words like boutique, dressing room, scheduler, retail, those type of words. So when they are searching for something like that, we're showing up. And then using the promoted.
So that search is within Shopify itself, or is it its own standalone app within like the App Store or the Google Store, the Google Play Store?
Within Shopify itself.
So it's within Shopify itself. Okay, so that helps there.
I believe it's called like partners, or no, so partners.shopify or like app.shopify, and then you can see all the apps that Shopify offers. So everything from Facebook, Pinterest, kind of the gamut of apps, I think. Mm-hmm. I'm not even gonna guess what number that it is on there, but there's quite a few.
And then how many people are working on this now, and do you envision if it grows, what would be needed longer term to keep up with something like this type of platform if it was to succeed?
Currently just myself, and then in addition, then I have my website development team. So Codilation is the development team on the project. And on that team, we have 5 people that are on our daily calls. So we have a daily call at 2 o'clock every day, and then we go over our roadblocks and then what our next opportunities are. Moving forward, as funding permits, I would like to hire a director of business and sales, a retail support manager, so kind of that customer service side of things, and then marketing.
And then last question, have you thought about, you talked about data and data analytics, have you thought about maybe as using that as an add-on possibly, or as a upgraded feature, if you will, to help you potentially with development costs?
Yes, that would be the goal. So right away, we are entering the market at a little bit of the middle to high range for Shopify apps. average price right now for paid apps is $30. But the Shopify itself, their baseline that most retailers use is anywhere from $90 to $130 monthly. So being the only one available, we felt $50 was manageable as far as a retailer's budget, and then kind of gives us still that opportunity to scale. If right now, I would say it kind of depends a little bit on how the process goes. If we find we aren't showing enough value in our first phase, we might offer that as a free trial beginning, kind of test it out and let us know what you think. And then if it does get great feedback as far as the analytics side of things, then look to charge for it, kind of as other subscription-based models have shown through the years.
Thank you. Ms. Sosowski?
So what happens if your app doesn't get picked up by Shopify? Right, because you're waiting for approval, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
To our research, they won't say you're not allowed. They just have to make sure your app works and does what it says it's going to do.
Okay.
So since their skin's in the game as far as being the hosting platform, they just want to make sure our app works. So that's what we found. It doesn't seem, from our research in the forums and blog kind of posts, no one gets denied. It's just how long it takes you to get it right, that they can't break it.
Okay, you stated that your development team was in Fargo. Where are you from?
I am born in Grand Forks. I grew up in Wisconsin, and I've been back in Grand Forks for going on 9 years now.
Okay, so you do live here?
Yeah.
In the city. Okay, that's good to know. I think it's a great idea. I mean, maybe not for like, how's it going to help grow Grand Forks in North Dakota? You know, I feel like it would be an app more used in a larger city with more boutiques. I mean, I've never even heard of Shopify, to be honest with you. And so, I don't know, can you tell me how it'll help, like, grow Grand Forks?
Yeah. In Grand Forks, we have more boutiques than I even know about. I'm sure we all shop at a different one. So a big added value from feedback I've gotten is we all have really busy schedules, and boutiques may have challenging hours to fit within those busy schedules. So I know myself and some other feedback I've gotten from market research. I did do a survey that we had about 54 people respond to, everywhere from 16 years old to 65 years old. Everyone loves to shop online, but they don't either check out, so they have abandoned carts, and then because they're just buyer's remorse, they're too worried that it's not gonna work, they're gonna have to return it, all the hassles that are dealt with it. And then they don't shop in person as much because they're just too busy. And they value their time somewhere else. So whether that's over their lunch hour or the hour between after work and when the boutique closes, they just have other things to do that they find more important. So our retailers that are local are kind of losing their stamina when it comes to that. And the workforce is really hard right now too, so they've cut their hours. So by providing a way that I can say, I have 20 minutes, I'm gonna show up, these 6 things that I want are going to be ready in my dressing room with my name on it, and they are dedicating that 20 minutes to me, not necessarily in a sense of hand-holding, here you go, let me take it off the hanger for you, but just prepared and ready to serve, and then maybe suggest. A big thing is just getting that person in the door for that retailer, and then my location would be Grand Forks, so everyone I hire would be here and then be looking to grow and do that. But then we'd also be a national reach, so Shopify being the biggest one, we'd be taking dollars from outside of our state and bringing them back in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Ms. Simmers, thank you for being here. Neat idea. Most of my questions were answered, but so with the 30,000, it would allow you to, you've already developed, but tweak and develop phase 2. That's part of what the proceeds are. You've answered about the revenue model. I'm curious on your the cost side of things. So once you do this, Shopify approves it, what's your break-even sales as you look out in 12 months? How much revenue do you need to cover the costs that you have so you can continue to invest and grow and ultimately, 12 months from now, make payments on the loan? So what does your forecast look? What are your break-even sales based on your cost structure?
Yeah, for monthly projections with including the payments back on loans, it's looking at about 6 months. So the goal subscribers is 50 in our first 6 months. So with reoccurring revenue, 50 at $50 a month is $2,500. And the beautiful thing with software as a service is your overhead's very low. So you have your basic hosting, kind of security, taxes, legal at the end of the year. But other than that, we don't. In the startup right away phase, it's a great thing to not have the overhead of a brick and mortar shop. We can kind of be nimble with our actions. So right away, 6 months for that just monthly. And then moving forward, I believe it was the end of 2023. So with reoccurring kind of, as we grow, I know there's going to be more development and adding on and stuff like that.
Thank you. I'm glad you thought that through, and that's the purpose of this program, in my opinion, is to help with this and get to the point where you get hopefully cash flow positive, and then you can start looking at how you grow the business. So I don't have anything further. Thank you.
Perfect. Anybody else? I've used Shopify. I think it's great. It's a great platform. Sure, there's 8 boutiques in Grand Forks, but that doesn't matter because you're marketing it towards the world. And any online platform can use it that's using Shopify. I just pulled up some statistics on Shopify, and it said that there's almost 4 million e-commerce sites built with Shopify. And so I think that's important. I like the idea of the software, and I just like the idea. I'd never use it, like Mr. Crary.
You never know.
My Target t-shirts do just fine for me, but I do think it's a good idea and something I haven't thought of before. So
Maybe some potential gifts for special people in your lives.
You never know.
Could even look at it as like a date. You just book the appointment for your significant other,
Sure.
and then when the bill arrives, just have them mail it to you. Whatever.
During Monday Night Football, perfect. Got it.
I like this. We're already dreaming up marketing campaigns.
Absolutely.
This is working.
With that being said, and time being short, is there any motions?
I'll make a motion.
I'd second.
Motion by Mr. Wolf, second by Mr. Crary. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you and good luck. Good luck.
Thank you all. I appreciate your time.
All right, moving on. The Malaysian Kitchen, item 4.2. I hope I said that right.
You said that perfectly, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Noor's Malaysian Kitchen overview. Noor Abdul Aziz is here this evening, or this afternoon. I'll have her come up and tell her story in just a moment. Noor and her husband, Garrett Glass, are owners of Noor's Malaysian Kitchen. It's a mobile kitchen offering authentic Malaysian cuisine, as you would imagine. By all accounts, they have very popular cuisines and are among the longest lines at events like Farmers Market and Greenway Takeover and other regional festivals. I can attest to both the quality of the food and the long lines. I've experienced both a couple of times. The current setup makes it very difficult to operate in certain weather conditions and is not equipped with the cooking equipment necessary to prepare foods fast enough, and so they're missing out on sales based on the equipment and the setup that they have. They have been operating their business in an inefficient food trailer for 2 years now. The goal is to purchase a food truck with all the necessary equipment to meet their needs and with all the proper requirements in terms of code. A summary of the food truck that they hope to purchase is in your packet along with their application. That's part of the public packet. Again, financial information, business plan, and other items were sent as part of a confidential packet based on the sensitivity of that information. The cost of the food truck and some other minor equipment is about $56,000. Noor and Garrett are offering to invest, or they will invest $26,000 of their own resources into this investment, and they are seeking a $30,000 loan under the terms and conditions as a program. I mentioned in my opening remarks that the startup loan program is corporately guaranteed but doesn't seek additional collateral typically. However, I'm going to kind of go back on that a little bit for this proposal. They're asking the Growth Fund to financially support the acquisition of something that's very tangible. It's a food truck that's going to have all the necessary requirements and has value. So Noor and Garrett are offering to offer the food truck as collateral for this loan as they move it forward. So I'll invite Noor to come up to the podium and share her story about Noor's Malaysian Kitchen, including her long-range plans for Grand Forks, which are very exciting, and then afterwards she and I will be very happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Lin.
Thank you, Mr. Lan, Chairman, committee members of the Growth Fund. My name is Noor. I was an architect before I moved here from from Malaysia, and we started serving Malaysian food to the community of the Grand Forks. I enjoyed it. I like it. And now we are currently expanding, and we are hoping to get a better facilities to handle the customer demand. And this is why we asked for a food truck to be successful and to serve better. Yes.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Curry?
Well, thank you for coming. Thank you for applying. Can you tell us if the food truck is successful? Yeah, any long-term future plans for permanent establishment, or what your thoughts are?
Yes, I do. We do plan on opening a brick and mortar in a few years. This food truck will be just a stepping stone to go there. So with low risk and low cost, so we try for food truck and then hopefully better for restaurants in a few years.
And can you go through, maybe how long the current food truck that you've had, how that's been going, how successful you've been thus far, and anything you'd see why that would change moving forward?
I'll explain. Okay, I'll let Garrett help me to explain that.
Okay, so this spring I built our current trailer. And the main issue that we have, other than the cooking equipment is not commercial grade, so it is very slow, is that it is only temporary on the licensing. So we cannot be open except for special events. So we're currently operating 1 to 2 days a year, or 1 to 2 days a week, sorry. And we're only doing it for, the summer months when it's warm outside. And previously, last year, we operated out of a pop-up canopy, with the same thing for the special events, and we had about $12,000 in sales out of the pop-up canopy, and with the trailer I built this spring we've expanded and we're over $30,000 in revenue this year, and that's operating 2 days a week max out of just the summer months. And with the food truck we're going to be open 5 days a week, and we went through all the numbers. I've talked to various other food truck owners and restaurant owners, and we think all of our projections that are in the packets, everything is very conservative. And our current cost ratio is just over 24% for the cost of goods. And we estimated that we would need roughly $500 in daily sales averaged in the slow months when there's no events going on. And then we would, be profitable in 10 months.
Where would you operate during non-events, like just on the daily then?
So we've already been reached out to by various places like downtown businesses, the hospital at All True, L&M, and then just setting up outside of, the industrial park for hitting the lunch hours and then hitting supper hours downtown. We already have multiple areas that we could go to, it's just we can't do it currently. And then once we have the ability to do it, we would also be advertising and looking for places that, catering and any kind of gatherings like that.
Great, thank you. Ms. Whitney?
A question about the truck. Are you buying a truck that's already ready to go as a food truck? Do you have to retrofit it? What's the process for that, and how long would it take you to be up and running with this particular food truck?
So we actually included an estimate to have everything custom built and equipped and just ready to go. The only thing that wouldn't be is the, the perishables and the utensils and stuff when we already have that because we're in business. So the estimate would be roughly 2 to 3 months build time. And due to the time of year now, it would be ready to go before we are in the spring due to the weather.
So it's a brand new truck? Is it a used? Or are you getting it from somewhere else?
Built.
Mr. Wolf?
Yeah, thanks for being here today and answering some of my questions on the numbers side. It's good to hear you're thinking of those. So as you look forward, so that it's going to be built and it's a loan and then you're putting in some equity, so which is a good practice. I'm just confirming, when you look at that cost and you guys, you've grown revenue, continue to grow revenue, your projections are you'd be profitable and covering any loan payment in year one, so you're looking at that. I guess is the cost fixed with the vendor you're buying it from? Do you have an agreement? In today's world, the prices are going up, so is this a fixed cost that you have right now?
Thank you for that question. We actually just went and renewed our quote about 2 weeks ago in preparation for this meeting because we didn't want to have outdated numbers. So we just re-updated all of our numbers with the SBDC and with the quote.
Last week.
Yeah, so they should be current. That's a good practice. Thank you, no surprises. And with the growth fund, I think with the program that we have, I'm not sure if all this would be due at once, but perhaps a good practice would be for our loan proceeds, when you would want them to be dispersed, we would send them directly to the manufacturer, and then whatever remaining payments would be, if there are any unexpected costs, would be additional responsibility of yours. But that would be something I think that we, as a growth fund, we've talked about and done in the past. So just wanted to point that out, but I don't have any other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Any further questions from any committee members?
I'd just like to say that I appreciate that you're allowing the food truck to be collateral. I think that that's the way that we'd all like that to go, and I think that makes it a lot more comfortable. I'd like to say appreciate your food. At least maybe 50 of those dollars have been mine. I haven't had to stand in too long of a line, so I appreciate that. Third, my employer would like to host you. We host food trucks every week. And fourth, I would move approval.
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Whitney. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck. I believe our next item is item number 5, Startup and Accelerate Loan Program, Suspend Programs, Establish Strategic Planning Working Group. Ms. Richards.
Thank you. As you recall, last month's meeting, we did a little bit of, what Mr. Lund did and reviewed the kind of the particulars of the startup program. The impetus for this kind of overview that we did last month was the Accelerate loan to True Weather Solutions. By approving that loan, we effectively reached the cap that was set on these two high-risk loan programs. Kind of two-part request of the group today. We want confirmation that you agree that until we kind of figure out how to deal with caps and revise program descriptions, we need to kind of put both of these programs on hold And then in order to really revise them appropriately and look at these caps in the appropriate light, we put together what we're calling a strategic planning working group, so that we can, rather than just kind of, Band-Aid the problem, really kind of take a step back, look at how economic conditions have changed so much recently, both nationally and particularly for the Growth Fund. With the sale of the corporate center, we're not in the business of owning properties as much as we used to be, and we're on the verge of opening a tech accelerator across the street. So the idea here is, yes, we need to deal with these two programs in particular, but to really do that well, we should take kind of a step back and really review where the Growth Fund wants to go in terms of priorities, commitment to tech versus other options. So that's the second part of the request today, is to concur that that is a good approach, and then to discuss what the membership of that working group would be. EDC staff and city staff have kind of discussed this. We think it's probably reasonable to have the working group have representatives from this body, the JDA, EDC Advisory Board. We certainly want, all these groups that weigh in on so many levels of what these programs are supposed to do to be involved, as well as, folks like Mr. Wolf, who is a banker and brings that kind of technical knowledge. Mr. Crary, you've been in the investment realm, so we're looking for both representation of these groups as well as, experience in the field. More than likely, we'll get some help from Mark Schill and Praxis to kind of bring that data collection point home and help convey it in a meaningful way. And then in terms of the review of the particulars of the Growth Fund portfolio, as we mentioned before, finance staff would like to wait until the end of this year so that the books are closed, and then really kind of look at that in the most, detailed light possible, where we are now and what is our capacity to add, what is our need to reduce funding on these programs. Again, look at that original cap that was put in place when, the Accelerate program was launched. And, as probably sensible with any loan program, but especially a high risk, kind of review those assumptions and regroup with the knowledge and experience that we've had over the past year and a half now. Bring some metrics, the Accelerate users, what are their job creation rates? What sort of investment have they made in the area? So with that, staff is really here for input. First part, as I said, confirm that you agree that we should suspend taking applications from these two programs on a short-term basis. And then secondly, engage in this planning exercise that will result in some very specific recommendations on, how to tweak the particulars of these programs and perhaps others as we go through the process.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. Mr. Crary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Richards, appreciate it. I think, for the last couple of years, it seems like every Accelerate loan, we're kind of on the fly, trying to still kind of tweak it, and so I think it's good to maybe take a step back and really think through what's the purpose, what's the goal, what's the objective. So I think that's wise. Is there a way to potentially not necessarily close the programs, but maybe, I just don't want to miss out on an opportunity from somebody or something, that comes along in this discussion period, but maybe still, just keep them in the queue, so to speak, and just so we're not literally, I just don't want to turn people away. We might have to tell them, it's going to be delayed before anything's formally maybe decided on, or maybe I don't know if that's too much work on city staff or EDC or whatever too, to start that process, but maybe just keep certain ones that are interested in a queue. And
Well, since the intake process starts at the EDC, I'm going to let Mr. Lund field that one.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Curry, as Ms. Richards indicated, I mean, I guess the applications do originate, I mean, the conversations originate in a lot of different places and opportunities introduced through many channels, but at the end of the day, they come to the EDC and we help them package that and go to the EDC board and then onto this committee if it's appropriate. So through those discussions, we'll certainly have the conversation. This program has been valuable. No one can predict the future, but sort of keep them on the warmer, if you will, as we're kind of working through that process with anticipation of hopefully early next year being able to start, we'll see how the process unfolds. But from my standpoint, hopefully we'll be able to, process applications again. We've had some pretty exciting companies come through the Accelerate program in particular, exciting companies in startup too. But from my standpoint, I believe like to find a path forward because I think we have had some good movement on some tech companies. That was a region for the Accelerate loan program. We're underserved when it comes to tech companies and tech jobs, and I think it'd be interesting, and I assume part of this process will to understand how that dial has moved and how much that has moved, so I really look forward to that process as well.
Further,
Yeah, I think it always is good to kind of do a postmortem and take a look, right? We're at a point where we've reached some caps, so I don't think it hurts to do a good deep dive at this point, because I think to your point, Mr. Curry, we do keep asking a couple questions every time, and so I think putting a little bit of stepping back and putting some thought behind how we might want to move forward, given that there's some changes coming as well. So I don't think that will hurt in some respects. So are you also, Ms. Richards, looking for names this evening or this
Absolutely.
afternoon, I should say?
Yes, both, I guess, from a volunteer perspective, if you're interested, or someone that you think would be a good fit. I do want to let everybody know that Jonathan Holt, who is out of the country, he did email and say, while I can't be here, he would be interested in participating in some way, shape, or form in this.
thank you.
Given that, I would put his name forward, or Mr. Curry or Mr. Wolf, as you suggested, with their backgrounds. I think either, any of those would be excellent names to put forward.
Yeah, I'd be willing to spend some time there too, if the group feels that's helpful.
Thank you. Mr. Weigel, as chair, do you have any interest in participating as a member of the working group, or would you rather
I
just...
would defer to the wonderfully competent people on this board to take that position.
Well, I think as I put in the staff report, feedback from you, Keith and I will discuss, get a list put together of likely candidates that we will reach out to, so that when this goes to JDA next week, we can have a list and certainly share that with you in advance of the meeting.
Thank you.
So with that, I guess I would request a motion that kind of capsulizes the discussion, that we want to not completely dispense with discussion of these programs, but kind of temporarily put them on hold with, I'm not sure of Keith's terminology, but keep them on life support until we have an updated cap and program description early next year, hopefully.
Mr. Kavami?
Just one follow-up question. Is the intent for these meetings, membership, I guess, isn't the intent for the membership of these meetings to be limited so that these aren't posted meetings? Is this strategic going to be, what's the goal there? And are members of the council going to be included,
That's part of the, I guess, nuance, that we'll try to craft something that doesn't create a quorum of another body. We anticipate these being public meetings, but certainly not public in that it would be
Sure.
televised and at a particular time and place.
Thank you. Yep. I would make the motion that we suspend and reevaluate through a strategic planning process.
I'll second that.
A motion by Kavami, second by Wolf. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. We have a motion to adjourn. Moved by Kavami, second by Whitney. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.